My sister thought a joke could erase me, but that night her words became the first exhibit in her own trial. The dining room glowed as if it were staged for a photograph crystal shimmering under chandeliers dark wood polished, until it looked wet champagne fizzing like an orchestra warming up. Conversation ran high too loud with certainty. Monica sat at the center as though the restaurant had been built to frame her silhouette. She lifted her glass, her voice carrying across the table as if every ear were trained to hear only her. She launched into a monologue about her new promotion at the defense contractor. My parents leaned forward, proud smiles pasted in place, heads bobbing as though success were an inheritance she alone had claimed. I sat 2 seats away, half in the shadow, folding my napkin with deliberate calm. Then came the line. Abby even tried the army once, couldn't even survive basic training. Her smile, sharpened eyes scanning for laughter. It arrived on cue, first from her friends, then from the safer guests, eager not to be left out of the performance. My parents chuckled indulgently, the sound of people who believe humiliation is just good fun when directed the right way. In that moment, I felt heat rise in my chest, but my face remained composed. I had learned long ago that silence could be armor. My mind snapped back to a summer evening years before me in crisp ROTC uniform, OCS acceptance letter, clutched like a medal ignored, while Monica jingled car keys under the porch light. My father had laughed, "Don't be reckless, Abby," as though ambition were a hobby. That day had written the first entry in the ledger of debts they refused to acknowledge. Back in the present, forks scraped plates, laughter ricocheted, and Monica basked in her own cruelty. Only one man did not join in. Stephen Langford, the DoD executive at the far end of the table, kept his face, neutral eyes fixed on me with the quiet evaluation of someone measuring steel. I forced a thin smile, let my shoulders rest against the chair. Monica's words might have sounded final to everyone else, but to Langford and me, they hung in the air differently, evidence waiting for context. She winked, clearly convinced she had won another round. She didn't notice how the ground had already shifted beneath her. Langford turned his water glass a fraction, then slid a small card across the table. White against mahogany, its edge caught the light like a blade. I placed my fingers on it without breaking rhythm, without drawing a single glance. His words were simple, quiet enough to be mistaken for politeness. "See you tomorrow at the Pentagon." Monica looked away, too busy polishing her smile. My parents missed it entirely, engrossed in planning their next toast to her brilliance. But I felt the weight of the moment settle like a coin on a scale, the first sign that the balance might one day tip. My secure phone vibrates. Operation Gilded Cage priority alert. They thought I was a ghost at the table. They didn't know I was the lead on the file with her name on it. Fort Meade's SCIF hummed like a refrigerated mind. Fluorescent light flattened color. Server racks exhaled in a metronome hiss. I badged through, signed the log, and let the door seal my private life behind steel. The analysts were already up on the board. A network graph spidered across a dark screen, nodes, pulsing edges drawing tight. "Walk me through it," I said. "SIGINT correlation complete," Chen answered. Exfil originated inside Cortez Defense Restricted VLAN. No outside lure, no rat. Someone with keys opened the door. Inside, not out. I kept my voice even. Timestamps, credential use, anomalous processes. The pattern told on itself, logons at odd hours, encrypted bursts pinned to bogus maintenance tickets, then a scrub that forgot the dust under the rug. Professional or coached. Either way, they left fingerprints you can't boil off, entropy drift, clock skew, human cadence, inside code. I crossed to General Whitman's office. He looked up, measured, steady. "Sir," I said, "I have a familial tie to a senior executive at Cortez. Monica Turner is my sister. I request guidance and stand ready to recuse." He let the silence work. Then, "Your knowledge isn't bias, Colonel. It's leverage. Do it by the book." Understood. We briefed the task force. Warrants drafted, scope constrained, minimization underlined twice. When approvals landed, the floor moved as one. Caldwell ran point, isolate uplinks, cradle drives image bit for bit verify with SHA 256. He read hashes aloud. I countersigned each line, every handoff witnessed, every seal dated. Chain of custody became a spine no one could bend. Back in the lab, copies bloomed. File trees branched, emails indexed, audit logs stitched into a narrative. Caldwell flagged finance a soft river of money through Turner Horizons Foundation. Charitable on paper, convenient in practice. Funds arced from shells to a consultancy with no deliverables, then vanished into a trust. Document and compartmentalize, I said. No speculation. Yes, ma'am. Whitman joined the evening sync. How are you, Abby Functional? I said. He nodded. Justice isn't comfort, it's clarity. Night pressed down. On my screen, the provenance map congealed controlled files, query outputs wrapped as attachments, all threading back to a single user context that changed desks, but never rhythm. You can disguise a face. Cadence betrays you. My monitor pinged target confirmed. Monica Turner. I didn't speak for a breath. I wrote the memo I'd rehearsed for years, formal conflict notice limits of authority, escalation plan signatures. I sent it, then headed for Alexandria. The DOJ suite smelled like paper and coffee. We sat across from attorneys. I laid out the map signals, hashes, transfers, narrowness of our warrants. They asked the right questions and cut the edges cleaner. We'll move, one said. DOJ sends encrypted email arraignment scheduled, Eastern District of Virginia. Defendant Monica Turner. They thought a motion could bury the truth. I had spent my career proving that numbers never lie. December in Alexandria pressed a pale light against the courthouse glass. Inside the courtroom smelled of paper and varnish, a sterile calm that made every word carry weight. Truly. Monica arrived bracketed by lawyers whose suits fit like armor. My parents sat behind them, postures polished for the public view. General Whitman kept to the back, a granite stillness. Ryan Caldwell lined our evidence boxes in a neat row, tabs and seals aligned the custody log clipped where a judge could reach it. Your Honor, lead defense began. The digital evidence is tainted, improperly seized. He lectured about scope and minimization, about dates and drives and doubtful hashes, fog meant to make the room forget there had ever been a horizon. The prosecutor rose. The United States calls Colonel Abigail Turner. The oath fit like a familiar instrument. On the stand, I laid out the sequence containment order network, isolation, read-only imaging, hash calculation at acquisition and verification at every transfer. 2 signatures at each touchpoint, timestamps from independent clocks, an air-gapped workstation, photographed seals, a ledger that didn't flinch when stared at. Caldwell followed with the exhibits. He did not perform them. He presented them, hash values printed and mirrored, on-screen receipts initialed in different inks, each handoff witnessed by name and badge. When defense pressed him on offsets and tool versions, he cited build numbers without checking notes. Whitman's maxim threaded my breathing: justice isn't comfort, it's clarity. I kept answers short, declarative. Facts are oxygen. Emotion is weather. Defense pivoted. Colonel, isn't it true you have a personal stake? I acknowledged the familial tie and the written boundaries of my role. DOJ lead my testimony limited to method. The judge watched my face, then the paper, and then the clock. The prosecutor redirected to the integrity of the data. We walked the court through one artifact from collection to analysis, the image ID, the calculated SHA 256, the match at every verification point. Caldwell identified the digits as easily as a father recognizes his child. The judge leaned forward. Counsel, he said to defense, your motion suggests contamination, but offers no proof. Respectfully, Your Honor, the government's narrative is, facts don't vanish because counsel wishes them away. He tapped the binder with one finger. Motion denied. For a heartbeat, the room forgot how to breathe. Monica's smile, so rehearsed it usually survived any weather, faltered at the corners. My parents did not move. During recess, the prosecutor passed close enough that only I could hear him. Next time, we use the dagger. I knew the blade he meant, the digitally signed email ordering a logging blackout still sheathed in a sealed folder reserved for a jury that would read it as motive, not just method. The thought didn't warm me. It merely aligned the pieces the way gravity aligns falling glass. Caldwell repacked the exhibits with the same quiet rigor he had laid them out. All receipts refiled, he said. No discrepancies. Good, I answered. You did well. Outside dusk collected on the courthouse steps. Reporters waited for quotes that would not come. I paused long enough to feel the honest cold of December after the chilled air of litigation. Back inside, the docket clerk slid a schedule across the counter. The prosecutor met my eyes. We both understood calendars can be verdicts written early. DOJ announces trial date before jury in January. I know the email will surface. This trial was only the opening move. What came next would decide everything. Stay with me and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next turn of justice. I once was the sister they mocked. Today the courtroom would rise when they spoke my name. January brought a brittle light into the Eastern District of Virginia courthouse, the kind that bounces off polished floors and makes everyone appear sharper, less forgiving. Flags stood sentinel at the corners. The seal of the United States loomed above the bench like a verdict before the verdict. The gallery was crowded, families of employees, a scatter of reporters, uniformed officers who had traded deployment for duty in this room. The air smelled faintly of wool coats and tension. The prosecutor opened with a voice as flat and certain as a blade. This is not simply corporate mismanagement. This is betrayal of national trust. His words laced the walls, pulling the jury's attention taut. Monica sat at the defendant's table, her suit precise, her posture almost bored. She twirled a pen as if it were a fashion accessory. Her lawyers leaned close, whispering their assurances. My parents sat directly behind her, faces set to project loyalty, as if loyalty were a photograph they could hold long enough to convince themselves. Stephen Langford was called. He moved to the stand with the same deliberate calm he had shown in Georgetown. Under oath, he spoke of Monica's remark at that dinner. She couldn't even survive basic training, and then described attending my Pentagon briefing the very next morning. He detailed the precision of the presentation, the clarity of my analysis, the gravity of the subject matter. One evening, her sister dismissed the Army as a failed detour. The next morning, I watched Colonel Turner command a room full of generals. His testimony rippled across the jury box. Eyes shifted, pens froze, the contrast too sharp to ignore. Then came my turn. I walked forward, uniform buttoned to regulation, ribbons aligned, every step exact. Defense counsel sneered with calculated contempt. Ms. Turner, the judge's gavel cracked once. Address the witness properly. General Turner. The syllables dropped like iron. A stunned quiet filled the room. My father, instinct stronger than denial, lurched to his feet in something close to attention. Spine locked, chin raised. He hadn't meant to. The movement betrayed him. For the first time in my life, he stood because of me, not against me. Questions came. I answered with the same measured cadence I had used in the SCIF method, chain of custody clarity. My answers were stripped of heat, but not of weight. Caldwell presented our custody log, his voice steady, his competence unmistakable. He read numbers as if they were scripture. Every exhibit aligned, every seal intact. The prosecutor moved to the final act. Your Honor, Government Exhibit 43. On the screen appeared the email, digitally signed, undeniable. Monica's own instruction: disable DLP logging for a maintenance window. The signature glowed with cryptographic certainty, the kind no lawyer can unmake. Gasps moved through the gallery like a breeze. Monica stared first with disbelief, then with dawning comprehension that this was no longer a skirmish she could buy her way out of. The jury returned swiftly. The foreman's voice was steady. Guilty on all counts. Monica's composure broke. Shoulders slumped, mouth unmoored, her hands trembled against the defense table. My parents did not move. They sat as if turned to stone, reputations calcifying into something brittle and broken. Judge Hayes stacked his papers, his tone unyielding. Sentencing is hereby scheduled. I rose from the stand, adjusted the fall of my jacket, and walked past the rows of eyes, past the marble pillars, past my parents, without a glance. I leave the courtroom without looking back. They once gave me a gift card instead of pride. Today, I carry a star that needs no receipt. April sunlight spilled across the lawn at Carlisle, soft but insistent, glinting on banners stretched between white columns. The brass band tuned low notes that trembled in the spring air. Rows of officers in dress uniforms filled the hall, their families a bright border of civilian fabric and proud, nervous smiles. It was a stage built for continuity, for the passage of burdens from one set of shoulders to the next. I stepped to the podium. The weight of the single silver star on each epaulette pressed steady against me, heavier than cloth, lighter than regret. The microphone waited. I didn't clear my throat. Instead, I let silence claim the room until it felt less like absence and more like attention. "Command is not a prize," I began, my voice carried without strain. "It is a burden." Faces stilled. Some nodded in instinctive agreement. I went on. "They tell you leadership is a ladder. They rarely mention how much of it is load-bearing. Every decision you make rests on someone else's bones. Integrity is armor. Ethics the only true weapon." Applause stirred, hesitant at first, then settling into rhythm. I let them breathe before continuing. "When I was 18, my sister was handed car keys in our driveway. I was handed a bookstore voucher. That ledger taught me the difference between pride given cheaply and respect earned slowly. Years later, I learned what General Whitman once told me: justice isn't comfort, it's clarity. And clarity is the only compass you can trust when the storm breaks." The words did not rise to passion, they sank into weight. I spoke of sacrifice, of nights when the mission outlasted the daylight, of decisions carried alone in rooms with no windows. I told them the true measure of rank was not applause but endurance, not the sound of titles, but the silence of responsibility met without wavering. The room listened. Families leaned forward. Younger officers scribbled notes they would never need to reread because memory had already fused them in place. When I closed, the hall rose first in scattered claps, then in a thunder that carried no trace of pity or indulgence. It was recognition, solemn and entire. Afterward, handshakes came. Whitman inclined his head with the smallest gesture of respect. Colonel Caldwell approached, his new insignia gleaming, his voice quiet. "Ma'am, I wouldn't have stood here without you. You showed me the ledger matters more than the applause." I answered only with a nod. It was enough. Then came the vibration in my pocket. My personal phone, not the secure line. I pulled it free and read the message. "We're proud of you. Can we talk?" The sender, Margaret Turner. My breath caught, not with anger, not with longing, just with the echo of what once might have mattered. I stared at the screen, then set the phone face down on the table. Peace doesn't require their approval. Caldwell returned a folder in hand, its seal unbroken. "Ma'am," he said, voice lowered. Langford flagged something urgent. I carried silence for years, watching my sister praised while I was dismissed as a failure. Yet silence became my strength. It taught me discipline, patience, and the power of truth. Now, standing here with a star on my shoulder, I know justice doesn't roar. It settles sharp and undeniable. I ask you, as someone who has lived this, to share your thoughts with me. What would you have done in my place? Leave your comments. I want to hear your voices. And remember, in your own life, never measure worth by others' approval. Integrity will always be your true armor.